If you're having problems with your septic system and you're tired of spending so much money each year to have it pumped, then SeptiClean is the answer for you. SeptiClean is an advanced specially formulated blend of bacteria used in the treatment of home and commercial septic systems. The breakdown of waste in your system relies on biological activity of naturally occurring bacteria. SeptiClean restores the natural biological process in your septic system and boosts the existing biological activity. SeptiClean is completely safe on all plumbing and can help prevent expensive emergencies in pumping. SeptiClean has approximately 6 to 100 times the bacteria count of other leading off-the-shelf brands in a 1-year supply. SeptiClean comes in a water-soluble pack, which you flush down the toilet once a month with no mess or stress. Save time, money, and maintenance on your septic system. Find SeptiClean at Emporium True Value Hardware on Main Street in Sag Harbor or visit micro-tab.com. That's micro-tabb.com. Micro-tabb.com. It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano. The Other Side of Midnight presents The Midnight Files.
Midnight in the desert, shooting stars across the sky. This magical journey will take us on a ride, filled with the longing, searching for the truth. Will we make it till tomorrow? Will the sun shine on you? Midnight in the desert, and we're listening. Ooh, we're listening to you.
We're listening to you indeed. This is The Other Side of Midnight. I'm Frank Morano. Well, tomorrow's the big day. Tomorrow, Congress is holding its next round of UAP/UFO hearings. Is anything going to come of this? Are we going to learn anything about this? Well, no disrespect to Congresswoman Nancy Mace, but the person who I believe should really be chairing these committee hearings is Congressman Tim Burchett, who's been a guest on this program and has really been the leader in the Congress on this issue. This is what Congressman Burchett says we should expect from tomorrow's hearings.
I think we're going to learn some things. It's peeling back the layers of an onion. The one thing I think that will happen eventually is President Trump will move towards total disclosure. And that's what's going to happen because it's just going to be some person's word against another. And, we have these government bureaucrats who keep saying that they don't exist, or as you quoted the one just then, saying that we misinterpret. Well, they're misinterpreting then because their own people are saying we don't know what the heck these things are. And the best pilots in the world that are our pilots are telling us these things are flying in close proximity to their aircraft.
Well, I don't know if he was one of the best pilots in the world, but he was certainly a pretty good one. I am very pleased to welcome back to the program in order to help us break down what's going to happen tomorrow, Kevin Randle, a retired Army lieutenant colonel who served in Vietnam as a helicopter pilot. He's also a prominent UFOlogist who is the preeminent expert on the Roswell crash of 1947. He's also the author of several books, including UFOs and the Deep State, a history of the military and shadow government's war against the truth. Colonel Randle, it's great to talk with you again. I hope you had a great Veterans Day.
I had a wonderful day.
All right, let's set the stage for the audience here. You have a pretty distinguished career. You're obviously a pretty good writer as well. What sparked your initial interest in the UFO issue? Why did you choose to focus your substantial talents on this?
Well, you ask a question that sort of has a trivial answer, I think. It's a very important subject, but I got involved in it because my mother took me to see Earth versus the Flying Saucers when I was a little kid, and it just kind of grew from there.
Gotcha. Well, hey, same thing with my fondness for science fiction. That's what prompted my interest on doing this on the radio. At 30 minutes after the hour, this is The Other Side of Midnight, talking with Kevin Randle. I alluded to your expertise when it comes to the issue of Roswell. Can you give us the Reader's Digest version? Because I think this was sort of the incident in the 20th century which kicked off modern UFO mania in America, both in terms of popular culture and in terms of public interest. Give us the Reader's Digest version on what your research suggests actually happened at Roswell.
The research that Don Schmidt and I conducted beginning in 1990 was that something fell at Roswell. We figured we would go down there, we would spend a few days, and we would come up with a solution. And as Don said on the Netflix special, we were wrong. We had meetings that were canceled and that sort of thing. Then we met with Bill Brazel. He's the son of the man who'd found it originally, found some of the debris himself. And we sat with him for an hour and a half, and he told us his experiences with this material. He talked about this foil-like material that you could wad up and let go of it and would go return to its original shape. Something like, he said, monofilament fishing line, which of course he was describing fiber optics, and some material that was light like balsa, had no mass like balsa, but he couldn't get a shaving on it with his pocket knife that he used to cut barbed wire, is what he said. We realized then there was something more going on. Everybody agrees something fell. What we learned through our interviews with the first-hand witnesses, people who were there at the time, people who had high military positions at the time. Edwin Easley, the provost marshal, for example, at the base, told me in a conversation when I asked him, are we following the right path? He says, let me put it this way, it's not the wrong path. And the path we were following was the extraterrestrial. We look at the Air Force investigation in 1995, the mid-1990s, and they come up with this Project Mogul, this top-secret Project Mogul. Purpose was classified top secret, but what was going on in New Mexico with Project Mogul, says balloon launches, was not top secret. It was published in the newspaper 2 days later. The point is, the Air Force said Project Mogul explains Roswell, but the problem is, and I may be digressing too much, but the problem is there were no ray wind targets on the balloon arrays to leave the metallic debris that supposedly was shown in General Ramey's office. In other words, the explanation was bogus. There is no terrestrial explanation for what fell at Roswell. This kind of underscores the importance of studying the UFO phenomena, because we're dealing with something here that is not terrestrially based.
Well said. I don't think you deviated at all from what I was asking about. Hey, what about, and we'll get into the particulars of what you'd like to hear and what you think we may hear in tomorrow's hearing. But what about what Congressman Burchett said there, which is that the key to all this is likely to be Donald Trump, and that he seemed pretty hopeful that Trump would move forward with disclosure and sort of come clean to the public about whatever the government knows. I don't know, what your politics are, and they don't matter for the purposes of this discussion, but are you optimistic that President Trump will do that?
Absolutely not. And here's the problem. We have heard this for literally decades. Jimmy Carter was going to reveal everything that was in the government files about UFOs, but it never got done. When I did UFOs in the deep state, the question was always asked is, why won't they come clean? And I realized that we're dealing with a shadow government, a deep state government. Yes, we reelect the president and the cabinet every 4 years. So we have a complete, you might say, change in government at least every 8 years, sometimes every 4 years. But if I'm the president coming in and I start dealing with the bureaucrats, I say, I want to know everything going on with UFOs. And I go to the director of Central Intelligence and ask him that question. And he says, well, Mr. President, that information is scattered over a number of different agencies. Let me pull together a comprehensive report for you, and we'll get back to you with that information. And somehow they never do. Jimmy Carter was talking to George H.W. Bush, who was the director of Central Intelligence at the time that Carter was elected. And Bush said, I would like to stay. He asked Carter asked Bush about UFOs, and Bush's response is, Mr. President-elect, I would like to stay on as the Director of Central Intelligence. And Jimmy Carter said, I have my own guy coming in. And Bush's response was simply, well, you're not the president yet. You're not cleared to know this information. So he stonewalled him. Jimmy Carter brought in his own guy, and we never got an answer from Jimmy Carter. And I think what we see happening is the bureaucrats are gathering that information. They want to stay in power. They want to reap the financial benefits of all of this, and they manage to divert the attention away from the president.
If folks are just tuning in, I'm Frank Morano. This is The Other Side of Midnight. My guest is Kevin Randle. He's written many books dealing with the UFO subject, but the book that's probably the most relevant to what we're going to be exploring this week on the Hill is the UFOs and the Deep State, a history of the military and shadow government's war against the truth. Kevin, let me ask you, you obviously were an officer in the military, and it doesn't sound like you know for a fact the firsthand knowledge that the government is keeping from us. How high, when you talk about the deep state and the unelected bureaucrats or the unelected government that knows the truth about what's going on when it comes to UFOs or extraterrestrials, how high does it go? Who knows about it? And you mentioned Jimmy Carter and now Donald Trump. Does the president, whoever the president is, does the president know?
I don't think the president knows, and here's why. There was a spy that we put into the Soviet Union. His guy name was Morris Childs. He had been a rabid communist in the 1930s. He changed his mind. The Soviets believed he was loyal to them. The FBI ran this guy as a spy into the Soviet Union for literally decades, never suspecting that he was giving information to the FBI. That operation was run out of the New York office. They didn't tell the president about it, with one exception. When Gerald Ford became president, he was supposed to meet with the Soviet leadership, and he was worried about the meeting, and they read him in on Morris Childs and what Morris Childs knows, so that Ford would be able to respond to the Soviet questions and whatnot. But the thing is, the president normally didn't know. The FBI kept that secret away from the president because there was no need for him to know to respond to it. So we have a precedent for that kind of operation.
With your background in military intelligence, what are your thoughts on the recent whistleblower claims like those from David Grush about a secret UFO retrieval program? Do these sound plausible based on what you've encountered?
The problem I have with that, and I've talked to people who are actually first-hand witnesses to the crash at Roswell, for example, a lot of that information is coming from Grush, is at least second-hand, probably third-hand source. I was able to deduce who some of his sources were, and a couple of them aren't very credible. They're dealing with the Del Rio UFO crash, for example, from 1948 or 1950 or 1954, and I say it that way because the witness on that, a guy named Robert Willingham, who told this story, kept changing the date, kept changing the aircraft he was flying, kept changing all kinds of information, that he was a retired colonel in the Air Force. And when I finally tried to vet this guy through the military records, I learned that he had risen in rank to the lofty position of E4, a very low-ranking enlisted man. He was lying about the whole thing, and yet we still deal with this Del Rio case, and I've just heard some of the people talking about how real the Del Rio case is. It's not. It's a hoax. And that's some of the people that they're dealing with. Crush mentioned the Italian crash from 1933, and yet my colleagues in Italy informed me 20 years ago that was a hoax. And so they're dealing with information. They haven't got down to the roots of it. They are running around on the ground up above, and they think they know what they're talking about, but oftentimes they're just hearing rumors and they're repeating rumors. Grush has no firsthand knowledge himself. He's talked to people who talk to people. I've talked to people who were the firsthand witnesses.
Wow.
Mic check. 1, 2. Are we recording? Hi, I'm Michelle Bernstein, an award-winning chef, restaurateur, and mom. I have a lot on my plate, including my psoriatic arthritis symptoms. That's why I was prescribed Cosentyx. It helps me move better.
Cosentyx secukinumab is prescribed for people 2 years of age and older with active psoriatic arthritis. Don't use if you're allergic to Cosentyx. Before starting, get checked for tuberculosis. An increased risk of infections and lowered ability to fight them may occur, like tuberculosis or other serious bacterial, fungal, or viral infections. Some were fatal. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms like fevers, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, had a vaccine or plan to, or if inflammatory bowel disease symptoms develop or worsen. Serious allergic reactions and severe eczema-like skin reactions may occur. Learn more at 1-844-COSENTYX or Cosentyx.com.
Ask your rheumatologist about Cosentyx.
Choosing a bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drink that's all flavor and just 100 calories? Easy. Choosing between creamy vanilla, double chocolate, and sea salt caramel flavors? A little harder. Try the delicious new Starbucks Frappuccino light drinks. Look for them wherever you buy groceries. Start with Starbucks coffee.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Acura's all-new ADX, a compact SUV that isn't just built for one thing. It's precision-crafted for everything. To escape the grind with available all-wheel drive. To go with your flow with available Google built-in.
Hey Google, turn it up.
Okay, turning up the volume. And crafted to be heard with an available Bang & Olufsen premium sound system. The all-new Acura ADX, crafted to match your energy. Acura, precision-crafted performance.
Take your vibes and go.
Google is a trademark of Google LLC.
So one of the most controversial aspects of UAP discussions is the alleged deep state effort to keep information hidden. From your research, what do you believe drives this secrecy, and why would certain agencies feel compelled to hide UAP knowledge from the public?
I think it all boils down to remaining in power. Remaining in a position to reap financial benefits. You look at Trump is going to bring in at the top the cabinet's going to clean out the Biden administration cabinet, put his own guy in. That's what they always do. But there's a level below that, just below that, of professional bureaucrats who go from administration to administration to administration, and they're guarding this information because it allows them to remain in power, and they reap the financial benefits from having that power and that inside knowledge.
In your book, UFOs and the Deep State, you dive into the role of the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. Do you think this unit or others like it are directly involved in suppressing UAP data today, or is it more of a coordinated multi-agency effort?
I think the Air Force drives part of that. We hear about this new investigation they're going to launch. We've heard that before. We heard that in 1952. We heard that in 1969 when the Condon Committee, the University of Colorado study came out. They talking about how Project Blue Book ended and the Air Force had no interest in UFOs, and yet we can prove there was another project known as Moondust that transcended all of that and carried on until it was compromised in 1985. And one of the things that the Air Force said at the time when a senator approached them and said, what is this Project Moondust? And the Air Force response is, there's no such thing. It never happened. When the documentation was presented to the Air Force Congressional Liaison Office, they said, oh, yeah, we had that project, but we never deployed it. We can prove it was actually deployed a number of times. Moondust, part of their mission was to recover space returning debris of foreign manufacture, unknown origin, and of course unknown origin refers to UFOs. We can prove that it existed in 1985, and we can prove that it continued on, and now we hear, well, we're just starting a new investigation into this stuff. We've never done anything like this before. It's been going on basically since 1947.
So it doesn't sound like you're terribly optimistic about what the public will actually learn at tomorrow's hearing. I've
sat through the streaming meetings over the last number of years and watched the things they've done. There was one investigation that they held, and they were asked about the governmental representatives were asked about the Malmstrom Air Force Base event of 1967 when the missiles were shut down during UFO sightings. The missiles couldn't be launched. And the congressional representative was asking questions, and the two guys from the Department of Defense, well, we don't know anything about that. Later on, one of them said, yeah, I've heard something about that. But that gives you an idea of exactly what they're doing. They're supposed to issue a report. We get, 18 pages that's maybe a C-level high school report. It just didn't tell us anything, and that's where we are. We keep getting nothing from them. They tell us what they're going to do, how they're going to investigate, what's going to happen next. We never get the good information that they've gotten about this. We hear things, the Navy pilots talking about what they have seen and what they've encountered. We can go back to any number of cases starting in 1947 that provides us with great information. The Levelland case. I did a book on Levelland. This was sightings that took place in November of 1957 where the object approached close to the ground, stalled car engines, it interacted with the environment, left landing traces behind it. Air Force officers were involved in it. It's all laid out in the book. Here's a case that had they investigated it properly, we would be having a different conversation. Yet the man that they sent to investigate spent 7 hours in Levelland talking to people. We don't know exactly what he did. All we know, he was there for 7 hours, and he went back to his base at, I think, Air Force Base, Peterson Field in Colorado Springs, and said, we're thinking it's ball lightning. Ball lightning doesn't persist for hours on end. It's not an object that's huge, stalling car engines. It never happened. The sheriff of Hockley County, Levelland being in Hockley County, said that he had gotten dozens and dozens of calls about this UFO that was hovering around the area for 2.5 hours. So we've got great cases that would have changed the discussion, and yet we can point to the place where the Air Force diverted that discussion to something else. NICAP, which was the civilian organization, National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomenon, headed by Don Kehoe at the time, got into a fight with the Air Force and the number of witnesses that they saw. The Air Force said there were only 3 witnesses involved. Kehoe said there were 9. You look at the Air Force file, there's at least 13 names in there, and then you look at what the sheriff said about the dozens and dozens of phone calls, and you can go through newspapers and gather additional names. This was an amazing case, and yet we don't know much about it because of the way it was handled. The disinformation campaign kicked in, the suppression kicked in. So I have no real belief that we're going to get anything new in this investigation these hearings that are coming up. We don't. The people involved really are not key to understanding UAP. So I don't know where they're going on it. I just don't have a whole lot of faith in them getting to the answers.
Admiral Timothy Gallaudet, who I think is going to be one of the witnesses tomorrow, he recently supported Grush's claims, saying he believes in the existence of non-human intelligence. How much credibility do you think testimonies like his add to the overall case for UAP transparency? And does that bring us any closer to disclosure?
I can give you the names of literally dozens of high-ranking military officers involved in Roswell, for example. I mentioned Edwin Easley, who told us it was basically extraterrestrial. We can look at Joe Briley, who was the operations officer in Roswell in 1947, saying that Colonel Blanchard, who was the commander there, went on leave. Supposedly it was a dodge to keep him out of the keep him away from the reporters, I should say. And we've had this sort of thing before, where high-ranking officers had come out and made those sorts of claims. But unless they can present some kind of evidence, they can point us at a place to get the records that we can see for ourselves the evidence exists. It's just testimony. We need to get to the point now where we're beyond the testimony and we start looking at the documentation, and we can see what evidence has been collected. Roswell supposedly was a recovery of a wrecked alien craft. There's been other cases where pieces have been found. The landing traces, Ted Phillips, who was a UFO researcher, had 4,500 cases of landing traces where the UFO touched down and left marks on the ground. He said that if you told him the the configuration of the landing gear, he could tell you what the craft looked like based on his study. That's kind of the repetition that you want to get in a scientific method. We don't get that kind of information. Instead, it always diverts into, well, this is what I saw, but I can't tell you more about it because some of this information is highly classified.
Michael Schellenberger recently reported on the Pentagon's Immaculate Constellation program, which allegedly involves advanced data collection on UAPs. Do you believe programs like that are justifiable for national security, or are they yet another way of restricting public knowledge?
I think it's both. I think that when we're looking at the UAP as problem for aviation safety, for example, or national security, that kind of program is very important to the security of the United States. But it also hides the information that we want to get at about if there are alien visitations. We need to know that information so we can understand what is happening around us. I always think about, in the 1940s and early 1950s, you didn't want to announce that this alien craft had crashed because it could inspire panic throughout the United States. We didn't know about it, but we're much more sophisticated. We understand what's going on, and we'd say, this thing happened 80 years ago. My life has not been affected by it at all. So if you suddenly announce, yes, we have been visited by alien creatures, it's not going to change much of anything other than we now know we're not alone in our section of the galaxy.
I hope you'll come back because I have a lot more questions for you. But before I let you go, I have to ask you about this. How do you reconcile the Arrow statement that most UAPs are mistaken identities, like drones or secret technology, with the accounts of credible people who I've spoken to, who you've spoken to, and who've been out there, who describe encounters with highly unusual phenomena?
We have to look at the whole UFO phenomenon to understand that. About 96% of the people reporting UFOs, it is mistaken identity. There's no question about that. We get to the core of the cases, the important ones. I mentioned Levelant. We could talk about Socorro from 1964, where the police officer saw the landed craft with two alien creatures around it. It's one of the very few cases in Project Blue Book that they couldn't solve. They labeled it as unidentified. Most of the time when you said you saw an alien creature, they labeled it as psychological problems. So we can get to the point where we know what's going on if we look at the evidence. But as I pointed out, most of the cases that are reported are just mistakes. You can make them all the time. People report Venus as a UFO when it's closest to the Earth and brightest because they're not aware of what's going on in the sky around them. But there is that core of cases, that important core of cases, where we learn an awful lot about what is happening.
Kevin Randle, I really appreciate the time this morning. I know it's a tough hour, but thank you.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to share my thoughts with your audience.
Yeah, I hope folks check out the book or any of your books. You could just search Kevin Randle, Randle, on Amazon, but especially the book UFOs and the Deep State, A History of the Military and Shadow Government's War Against the Truth. If you want to comment on any portion of my discussion with Kevin Randle, you can give me a call, 1-646-720-0635. That's 1-646-720-0635. This is The Other Side of Midnight. Straight ahead.